Welcome to this deep dive. We are going to explore how to turn, those moments we all dread, failures, into fuel for growth. We've got a mix of sources today. An article packed with motivational quotes, some real life stories, the kind that'll make you rethink setbacks, and even a bit of research from psychology, just to add a scientific twist.
It's interesting because often we see failure as the end of the road, right? But what if it's actually a hidden doorway to something even better?
Okay. I'm intrigued. The article starts off with a whole bunch of quotes from people who, let's face it, totally nailed it in their respective fields. Churchill, Robert F. Kennedy, even Janet Fitch with that powerful line about the phoenix needing to burn to emerge. What struck me was how they all seem to agree that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's woven into the very fabric of getting there.
Absolutely. And it's not just about passively bouncing back either. Churchill, for instance, he talks about the courage to continue, which implies a more active choice, a deliberate decision to keep going despite the setbacks. So this suggests that resilience isn't just about being tough. It's about seeing failure as a temporary state, not a defining characteristic.
Right. And then there's Fitch's quote, the phoenix must burn to emerge. I mean, talk about a
Right.
visual, right? It's like you can't skip the messy, fiery part of the process. You kind of need that intense heat to transform into something even stronger.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's often in those moments of burning that we discover what we're truly capable of.
Yeah. Out of all the quotes, the one that really resonated with me was H.G. Wells. If you fell down yesterday, stand up today. So simple, yet so powerful. It's a reminder that we can't change what's already happened, but we can always choose how we move forward right now.
Yeah, I love that one too. Dwelling on past failures, it can be paralyzing, right? What this deep dive emphasizes is the power of focusing on the present moment and taking action today to make progress.
All right, so we've got these inspiring quotes setting the stage, but then the article throws in some real life examples that honestly blew me away. J.K. Rowling, facing rejection after rejection from publishers before Harry Potter took the world by storm. Walt Disney fired from his job for lacking imagination. I mean, come on.
Yeah. It's almost hard to believe, right? But that's what makes these stories so relevant. I mean, those giants of their fields, they faced incredible adversity too. Success for almost anyone, it's rarely a straight line. Like there are bumps, detours, maybe even some epic crashes along the way.
Okay, let's dive into one specific story. Oprah Winfrey's journey from a childhood marked by poverty and abuse to becoming one of the most influential figures in media. What makes her story so powerful, in your view?
Well, what stands out to me is how Oprah actively chose to reframe her experiences. Instead of letting her past define her, she used those challenges to fuel her personal growth. And I think that's a key takeaway for anyone listening. We are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we choose to respond.
So true. Oprah could have easily let her past dictate her future, but she didn't. She chose a different path.
And that choice, that unwavering belief in herself, is what ultimately propelled her forward. It's a powerful reminder that we all have that same capacity within us.
Okay, so we've heard from these incredible figures from history, and we've gotten a glimpse into some amazing comeback stories. Where do we go from here?
Now, this is where things get really fascinating. The article takes a turn towards the science of failure and growth. Now, I know psychology stuff might not sound like the most thrilling topic, but trust me, this is where the real aha moments happen.
All right, I'm all yours. Lay it on us.
So the article introduces this concept called a growth mindset. You've probably heard of it, but have you ever thought about how it can truly help you reframe failure?
I've heard the term, but honestly, I need a refresher. Isn't it about how you view challenges?
Exactly. A growth mindset is the belief that your abilities, your intelligence, your talents, they're not fixed. They can be developed through, effort and learning. It's like saying, hey, I might not be great at this yet, but with practice and the right approach, I can get better.
So instead of saying I'm terrible at math, you'd say math is a challenge I'm working on.
Precisely. It's subtle, but that shift in language reflects a totally different way of approaching learning and setbacks. When you believe you can improve, failure becomes less about your inherent worth and more about a step in the process.
That makes a lot of sense. So how does this growth mindset actually help us deal with those moments when we do fail?
Well, the research shows that people with a growth mindset are more likely to see failure as an opportunity to learn and improve rather than, a personal defeat. They're less likely to get discouraged and more likely to keep trying even when things get tough.
Because if you believe you can get better, you're not as scared to stumble, right? The stumbles just become part of the learning process.
Exactly. But here's where the research gets really surprising. A study from the University of Chicago found that we might actually learn less from our failures than we do from our successes.
Wait, really? That seems counterintuitive. You'd think messing up would be like the ultimate teacher.
Right. You'd think so.
Yeah.
But the study suggests that failure, especially if we don't have that growth mindset, it can actually hurt our self-esteem. And when our self-esteem takes a hit, we might shut down and avoid processing information related to our mistakes. It's like our brain goes into protection mode.
So it's not that failure itself is a bad teacher. It's that our emotional reaction to it can sometimes get in the way of us actually learning the lesson.
Exactly. And this is why understanding the science behind it is so powerful. It helps us reframe failure entirely. It's not about beating ourselves up when we mess up. It's about creating an environment where we can learn and grow, even from those moments that feel tough.
So self-compassion is key, right?
Absolutely. It's about acknowledging our mistakes without letting them define our worth. And it's about choosing to focus on the lesson learned, not dwelling on the negative emotions.
This is really making me rethink how I approach my own failures. It's like I've been so focused on avoiding them that I've missed out on what they could teach me.
It's a common experience. We're often conditioned to fear failure. But what if we shifted that perspective and started to see it as a stepping stone, a necessary part of the journey towards something greater?
Okay, before we go too deep down the philosophical rabbit hole, I have to ask about this section in the article that just blew my mind. It lists these amazing examples of failures that actually led to fantastic outcomes. For instance, did you know that penicillin was discovered because of a messy lab?
Oh, absolutely. Alexander Fleming, he accidentally left a petri dish open and it got contaminated with mold. But instead of just, tossing it out, he noticed something interesting, that mold was actually killing bacteria.
Bam! Penicillin, one of the most important medical discoveries of all time. It's like sometimes a little bit of chaos can lead to the greatest breakthroughs.
That's the beauty of serendipity, isn't it? We can't always predict how things will unfold, but we can choose to be open to the possibilities, even when they arise from unexpected mishaps.
All right, hit me with another one of those failure-turned-success stories.
Well, how about the invention of the microwave oven? Percy Spencer, an engineer working with radar technology, he noticed a candy bar in his pocket had melted while he was standing near a magnetron.
Wait, so he basically invented the microwave because his chocolate got gooey?
Pretty much. Of course, there's more to the story than that. But that accidental melting, it sparked his curiosity. It led him to experiment with using microwaves to cook food. And that changed how we all heat up leftovers forever.
Okay, those are some epic examples. But for us regular folks, how do we actually put this whole failure as fuel concept into practice in our daily lives?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And luckily, the article offers some really practical tips. It starts with embracing a growth mindset, which we've already talked about, but it's worth reiterating because it really is the foundation.
Right, so when you face a setback, instead of saying, I'm a failure, you try saying, this is a chance to learn and figure out what I can do differently next time.
Exactly. It's a simple shift in language, but it can make a huge difference in your attitude and how willing you are to keep trying.
What's the next step?
The article suggests analyzing our mistakes, which might sound obvious, but most of us avoid it like the plague. It's not about dwelling on them or beating ourselves up. Instead, it's about taking that step back and objectively looking at what happened, what went wrong, what can you learn from it.
So let's say I totally bombed a presentation at work. Instead of just cringing and avoiding presentations in the future, I should take the time to figure out why it went wrong. Was I unprepared? Did I not connect with the audience?
Exactly. That's turning failure into fuel for growth. The article even suggests keeping a failure journal, a place to document your mistakes, the lessons you learned, and how you'll approach similar situations in the future.
That's actually a really cool idea. It's like turning your failures into data points you can analyze and learn from.
It takes the emotion out of it and lets you approach those mistakes from a more objective, analytical perspective.
Okay. What other advice does the article offer?
Well, it emphasizes focusing on what you've learned from the experience rather than getting stuck in, the negative emotions. This can be tough, especially when you're feeling disappointed or embarrassed, right? But remember, failure is a part of life. And it's often those mess-up moments that teach us the most valuable lessons.
So instead of saying, I can't believe I did that, you shift to, what can I learn from this so I can make a better choice next time?
Precisely. And it links back to self-compassion. You acknowledge the mistake um, without letting it become your entire identity.
What else should we be doing to turn these setbacks into opportunities?
Don't be afraid to try again. It's easy to get discouraged after a setback, but each failure is a chance to learn and do better next time. This is where that idea of resilience comes in.
So don't let one bad experience stop you from going after what you want.
Exactly. The more we practice bouncing back from setbacks, the stronger and more resilient we become.
So failure can actually help us build resilience.
Absolutely. It's like a muscle that gets stronger the more you work it out, right? The more we face challenges and overcome them, the more equipped we are to handle whatever life throws our way.
Okay, this is really making me think differently about all this. What else should we know about turning setbacks into opportunities?
The article also points out how important it is to celebrate the small wins. It's easy to get caught up in the big picture and forget to acknowledge the progress we make along the way. Celebrating those little victories can help us stay motivated and keep a positive outlook even when things get tough.
So if I'm working on a huge project and I finally finish a really tough task, I should take a moment to acknowledge that, even if the whole project isn't done yet.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those small steps forward and appreciating the effort you're putting in. And it ties back to what the research says about self-esteem. By celebrating those wins, you're boosting your own self-esteem and creating a more supportive environment for learning and growing.
That makes a lot of sense. What other tips are there?
Another one is to keep your eye on the long-term goal. When you hit a setback, it's easy to lose sight of why you're doing what you're doing. Ask yourself, how might this current failure actually contribute to my future success? That long-term vision, it can be incredibly motivating, especially when you're feeling discouraged.
So it's like, even if I'm struggling in this moment, I need to remember why I set out on this path in the first place.
Exactly. That big picture why can help you push through those difficult patches.
Okay, I'm seeing how all of this fits together now. What else did the article suggest?
One that might surprise you. Try practicing mindfulness.
Mindfulness. What does that have to do with dealing with failure?
Mindfulness can help us be more present and aware of our thoughts and feelings, which lets us approach failure with more objectivity. We can learn from our mistakes without being so hard on ourselves.
So it's about being in the moment and observing your thoughts and feelings without getting totally swept away by them.
Exactly. You create space between what's happening and how you react to it, which is incredibly helpful when you're dealing with, tough emotions like disappointment or frustration.
I'm starting to see how mindfulness could be a really valuable tool in those moments. What's the final tip?
This one might seem counterintuitive, but try doing less.
Do less. But I thought we were supposed to embrace challenges and push ourselves outside our comfort zones.
You are. But sometimes, to really learn from failures, it helps to focus on fewer things at once. Prioritize those tasks that offer the biggest opportunities for growth. That way, you can dedicate more time and energy to analyzing your mistakes and coming up with new strategies.
So it's about being strategic and choosing where to focus your efforts rather than trying to do everything at once and spreading yourself too thin.
Exactly. It's about quality over quantity. And it connects back to the research on self-esteem. By setting yourself up for success in a few key areas, you're less likely to experience those self-esteem blows that can make it hard to learn from mistakes.
Okay. All of this is starting to make a lot of sense. But what about resilience and grit? We mentioned them earlier, but how do those fit into this whole failure as fuel idea?
The article suggests that failure can be a powerful way to build both resilience and grit, those qualities that help us, keep going when things get tough and ultimately achieve our long-term goals.
So the more we face challenges and overcome them, the more resilient and gritty we become.
Exactly. Think of it like a muscle that gets stronger with each workout. Yep. The more you face those setbacks and bounce back from them, the better prepared you are for whatever life throws your way.
So it's not about avoiding failure, but about learning to navigate it in a way that strengthens us.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the role of hope in all of this. When you can maintain hope, even when things are difficult, you're far more likely to persevere and find new pathways to success.
So even when things are tough, it's important to hold on to that belief that things can and will get better.
Exactly. Hope keeps us going when the going gets tough. And it's often in those darker moments that we discover our true strength and resilience.
I'm really inspired by all of this, but I'm also curious about the specific examples the article gives of people who've really shown remarkable resilience and grit.
One example that really stands out is Oprah Winfrey. We talked about her incredible journey earlier, but it's worth repeating just how much she overcame. Her childhood was, incredibly difficult, but she never gave up on her dreams.
It's amazing, right? She could easily let her past define her entire life, but she chose a different path.
And that's a testament to the power of resilience and grit. She didn't let setbacks define her. Instead, she used them to propel herself forward.
What other examples did the article give?
J.K. Rowling is another great example. Her path to publishing the Harry Potter series was filled with rejections and personal challenges, but she never wavered in her vision.
She faced a ton of adversity, but never gave up. It's a great reminder that success is rarely easy, but with grit and determination, it's possible.
Absolutely. Another inspiring example is Steve Jobs. He experienced setbacks throughout his career, including being fired from Apple, the company he co-founded. But he came back years later and led the company to levels of success that nobody could have imagined.
Talk about a comeback story.
Right. His journey reminds us that even the most successful people face failure. It's not about avoiding it, but about learning from it and using it as fuel for growth.
Okay, those are some really epic examples. But are there examples of everyday people showing this kind of resilience and grit, maybe in a field like academia, where setbacks are pretty common?
Yeah, the article touches on that too. Researchers and students, they constantly face setbacks, whether it's experiments that don't work out or papers that get rejected. But the people who succeed are the ones who learn from those setbacks, adapt to their approach, and keep pursuing their goals.
So resilience and grit aren't just for, world famous figures. They're qualities we can all develop.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that these qualities aren't just about being tough. You know, they also involve things like self-compassion and empathy.
That's an interesting connection. Does the article say more about how failure relates to empathy?
It does. It suggests that experiencing our own failures can actually make us more understanding and compassionate toward others.
So when we faced our own struggles, we're more likely to be understanding of what others are going through?
Exactly. Failure can, it can humble us and make us aware of our own vulnerabilities. That often leads to greater compassion for others who are struggling too.
It's like when you've been through something tough yourself, you're more likely to offer support and kindness to someone else who's going through something similar.
Exactly. And the article even mentions some research about how self-compassionate people, they find it really helpful to know that others have experienced similar failures.
So knowing we're not alone in our struggles can actually make us treat ourselves better.
It can. It reminds us that failure is a universal human experience, and it's not something to be ashamed of.
That's a powerful message. We're all in this together, and we all make mistakes. It's how we choose to respond to those mistakes that really defines us.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where self-compassion plays a crucial role. It allows us to acknowledge our imperfections without beating ourselves up for them.
This is all really eye-opening. I'm starting to see how failure can actually be a valuable tool for growth, resilience, and even empathy.
That's the power of reframing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
When we shift our perspective, we open ourselves up to all sorts of new possibilities and opportunities.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about reframing failure, embracing a growth mindset, analyzing mistakes, focusing on the lessons learned, and even the power of self-compassion. But before we wrap up, I'm curious about that study you mentioned earlier, the one that suggested we might actually learn less from failure than success. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. The research from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, it suggests that failure can sometimes have a negative impact on our self-esteem. And when that happens, we might actually avoid processing information related to those mistakes. It's like our brain wants to protect us from those negative feelings, so it shuts down the learning process.
That's fascinating and a little frustrating. So it's not that we can't learn from failure, it's that our emotional reaction to it can sometimes block the lesson.
Exactly. This is where all that talk about self-compassion comes in. If we can be kind to ourselves when we mess up, acknowledge the mistake without letting it define our worth, then we're more likely to stay open to the learning that failure offers.
So instead of berating ourselves for messing up, we can approach it more like, okay, what happened here? What can I learn from this?
Exactly. It's about shifting from a self-critical mindset to a curious one. That shift can make all the difference in our ability to extract valuable insights from our experiences, even the ones we'd rather forget.
As we've been talking about all these people who turn failures into fuel, it's amazing how often those setbacks seem to redirect them onto paths they never could have planned for.
Yeah. It's like those setbacks were necessary detours,
Yeah.
pushing them toward something even greater than they initially imagined.
And it makes you wonder, if they hadn't faced those specific obstacles, would they have achieved the same level of success or even found the same fulfillment? It's fascinating to think about, isn't it?
It really is. It reminds us that we don't always have to have it all figured out. Sometimes those unexpected turns lead us to exactly where we need to be, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time.
Okay, I'm having a serious aha moment here. What if, instead of seeing failure as a deviation from the right path, we saw it as just another path, equally valid and potentially even more rewarding?
Exactly. What if we could shift our mindset and embrace failure as a chance to, explore, discover hidden strengths, become more resilient and creative, even deepen our empathy?
I love that. It's like failure isn't a sign that we're off course. It's just a sign that we're on a different course, one that might lead to something amazing that we never would have found otherwise.
Precisely. And who knows what incredible discoveries await us on those uncharted paths.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. We've covered so much ground today, exploring how to reframe failure, develop a growth mindset, and even cultivate self-compassion. I hope you're leaving this conversation feeling empowered and maybe even a little bit excited about the next challenge you'll face.
Remember, failure is not the end. It's just the beginning of the new chapter. And that chapter, well, it might be even more exciting than you ever imagined.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into turning failure into fuel. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep failing forward.
And don't forget to embrace the detours.